Welcome to this Innova Systems webinar on setting up PDM Workgroup. Now the scheme that I'm going to follow for this webinar is I'm just going to go through the installation process for the server first of all, followed by a little bit of conversation about what you need to do to change your SolidWorks install to get the Vault admin tool, and then I'm going to move on to go through the Vault admin tool itself to show you some common settings our customers use and what we usually recommend when we're helping people set it up. So to start, to install, first of all, make sure you've got the disks so the server can see them, or copy the folders across so they're on the server. You're then ticking server product here, and you're choosing to install the SolidWorks Workgroup PDM server. Then hit next, and this takes you to the summary page. New in 2012, there's a whole load of red text here about validation codes being required. Don't panic about that, just hit change there, and that brings up this window. Now at the top here we've got the installation location for the service files. By default it goes into Program Files SolidWorks Corp. This is because my SolidWorks is in a slightly different location, but it doesn't really matter where that goes. Program Files is common for it, obviously. You've then got your installation location for the actual Vault data, so the SolidWorks files. That defaults to C Vault data, but you can put it on any other drives. Be a little bit careful if you're trying to put it on a NAS drive, some network storage. It can get a little bit antsy about that, so just be warned. Coming down to the validation section, serial number goes in, obviously, email address, and then you hit get code, and it only takes a couple of seconds if there's a web connection, and it brings in the validation code for you. Come back to summary, and you can see the red text has gone and our validation code's been approved. Don't worry about the background downloader for your server. Obviously for clients it can be quite handy, but the server, you don't want it going off and downloading stuff without telling you. And then hit install. Now the install only takes 5 to 10 minutes on the server. It's quite a small process, so that'll end pretty quickly. And then we come through to the final screen. Now obviously because we're on a server, we don't need to know what's new in SolidWorks and don't need to know anything else about the installation experience. And again, you don't need to join the SolidWorks Customer Experience Improvement Program for the server. So from there we can just hit finish and you're done. Now what that's done is that's installed the Workgroup server, and it's started up a service on the server called SolidWorks Workgroup PDM server, and that is what enables the clients to connect to your server in order to get hold of the files, check things in, check things out. If you at any point want to disable the Workgroup Vault from working, you can just turn the service off on the server. I'll show you a little bit later on. There's a tool to actually lock the Vault from within the Vault admin, but this is a way of doing it without having to get onto the Vault admin too. Now, to set up the Vault admin tool on your machine, what you need to do is you need to modify your SolidWorks install. And you modify your SolidWorks install, and underneath the SolidWorks Explorer option, you'll see the Vault admin handily pointed out there. And that is what you need to tick. This will be the only box which is blank. Tick it, and you're good to go. One warning. If you have installed SolidWorks, for example, at Service Pack 1 and you've then upgraded to Service Pack 2, you won't just be able to tick that box. Unfortunately, it will be a reinstall of SolidWorks to include it. If you're installing the Vault admin on a machine which doesn't have SolidWorks, go through the standard install process, use one of your serial numbers, and you'll just be untick all the SolidWorks stuff, and just tick the SolidWorks Explorer and the SolidWorks Workgroup PDM sections, untick the add-ins, and you'll be good to go there. Those are both free products, the Explorer and the Vault admin, so you're not going outside any licensing problems there, and that gets the Vault admin onto a non-SolidWorks machine. SolidWorks in the background, you've got the interface there, which you'll be very familiar with, and that is the default layout, and this is the Vault admin tool that you get. Now I'm just going to run through the various different options here. So right at the top, your Vault information, what computer it's installed on. In my case, it's installed on this machine. Don't worry about the license type. The root directory, this is where all the Vault data is going to be stored. As you can see, I didn't install mine to the default location. I went onto my E drive and I renamed the folder because here I've got several different sets of Vault data. Over on the right, you have a list of users and which of those users are administrators. Administrators get certain additional permissions, which we'll cover in a bit. The Vault lock Usually this is unlocked at all times. The only times you tend to lock it is if you're going to be doing upgrades. So for example, moving from 2011 to 2012, you can lock the 2011 Vault, and that essentially kicks all the users out. And then from there you can do your upgrade, and once you've finished the upgrade, come back into the Vault admin tool and unlock it so that people can get access again. On Vault Startup, you've got this option to validate the Vault. Again, usually that would be turned off, except when you've done an upgrade. The first time you start the Vault up, you may choose Next Startup to validate the Vault following upgrade, and that just means you've double-checked that everything's where you expect it to be. Viewing with e-drawings, within the document information window, when you access it via SolidWorks, you can get to an e-drawings image of your files, and this is just what you're allowed to do on that e-drawing screen. By default, they're ticked, but it's quite all right to untick them if you don't expect people to do anything other than spin it around and have a look at it. This usually matters more if you've got non-SolidWorks users using your Vault with contributor licenses. Delete, rollback, and archive does exactly what it says. Who can delete, rollback, and archive documents? Again, the standard option is administrators only, and that's where this box up here comes in handy. Because you can pick a couple of your senior engineers, for example, and they are also allowed to delete and roll back rather than constantly pestering the person who is labelled as the administrator for the system. Global settings. Now this is actually where most of the customization within the Vault goes on. What we've got here is a common layout. Keep an extra copy of latest files, essentially keeping a backup copy for every time somebody saves something in case there's a problem. Hide projects with no access. If somebody doesn't have any read access or write access to a project folder within, they just don't see it. If that's not ticked, what happens is it's sort of grayed out to show they can't click on it. Force user login does exactly what it says. It allows people to save their username for when they start SolidWorks, but they can't save their password, just to ensure that every time somebody starts SolidWorks, the person logging into the Vault is actually the person you're expecting it to be. Allow revision bumping. This is essentially to enable you to pick any future revision off your revision scheme at any point. So you can jump from revision A to revision D in a single step rather than having to check it out, check it in, check it out, check it in, check it out, check it in. Commonly that's turned off unless there's a problem, in which case the admin will log in, turn it on, allow the user to bump the files they need to bump, and then it'd be turned off again. Mainly because then you prevent errors, people accidentally bumping things when they didn't mean to. Allow latest revision overwrite does exactly what it says on the tin, allows people to check something back in at the revision they checked it out at. So if they check it out at D, they can check it back in at D or E, and there's the option there. Again, my usual advice is start with it turned off and turn it on when users need it, unless you're finding it's becoming a roadblock to you. Allow the change of document properties. So this is where a user is editing the properties directly within the Vault, so they're not checking the file out and having it open in SolidWorks. Allow users to create a sub-project. That's nearly always turned on. What happens is, as when you get to the projects folder, I show you a root project cannot be created in SolidWorks. If this tick box is turned on, users can then, from within SolidWorks, create sub-projects within the root project. Don't allow read-only users to open documents in Workgroup PDM Viewer. It's only relevant if you actually have users who are using the PDM Viewer licenses rather than the SolidWorks add-in, and then that just stops them actually opening them. They've got to use the document information window instead. Now, this next option, if you are using some other CAD programs that have those extensions rather than the SLD PRT for the SolidWorks, then you tick that to separate the two file types apart. Otherwise, what happens is Workgroup tends to want to take ownership of these file types, and that may cause you problems because they won't be files you're expecting to have inside the Workgroup Vault. Most of you will probably have found out that you can add attachments to documents, so you can take, for example, a Word document or a PDF, and you can attach it to a part, be it a manual or a spec document. All this tick box means is that you don't have to actually own the document you're attaching to in order to attach. Again, on by default, usually you find that people may just want to stick an attachment on. They don't necessarily want to take ownership of everything first. Set file system read-only attribute if not owner. Now this is one which usually I recommend turning on, but can catch some people out. If you have a file in the Vault which is called, to be original, part 1, then any document that you have on your computer called part 1 will be read-only or read-write depending on whether you own it in the Vault or not. So this is something that you turn on in order to say there's only going to ever be one copy of every file in the Vault, and therefore if somebody's got it on their desktop and they don't own it, they then can't read it or write it. They have to do a save as each time. So like I say, common advice to be on, but just be careful if your users are likely to put in very generically named files, for example, part, Vault, part 1, whatever it might be. Allow users to rename on by default, and usually something that people want, because people throw very generically named files into the Vault and then think this is not a good idea. So we allow them to rename it. Performance email, so this is, it just sort of pops something off to SolidWorks on a regular basis to say whether there's been any problems, that sort of thing. Most people have it turned off. Workgroup so rarely causes problems itself that it's usually not required unless you are actually experiencing issues. The next one is SolidWorks read-write, read-only access. Now this is sort of the SolidWorks version of what we've mentioned up here, so that if there is a file in the Vault, again, let's be original, part 1, then if you've got part 1 open on your screen, that will be read-write or read-only depending on your ownership permissions within the Vault. Skip drawing validation during check-in. Essentially what happens is it just runs through views and makes sure your drawings sort of are up to date with the models during the check-in. And then the final option is create PDF files in the Vault and normal check-in of SolidWorks drawings. This is where essentially it creates a placeholder PDF. Every time you put the SolidWorks drawing into the Vault, it then updates that PDF so that you can access it. And then finally, in the bottom corner here, you've got Vault log, and you can save or clear it. This is a log of all the transactions that happen in the Vault. Over time, obviously, it will get bigger, and you might find that you want to save away, for example, when you do an update to 2012, you might want to save away the 2011 log file as an archive, clear it, and start again for 2012. Just so that it makes it easier if there are any technical issues along the way. It's easier to find what we might be looking for. So that's the Vault settings page. That is really the most, not complicated page, but the one with the most options to pick between. So if we move into the Users and Groups tab, so on the left you have a list of users, on the right you have a list of groups. Creating a new user, hit the New User button, give them a name, give them a password, give them a display name. This becomes relevant whether for users who have different options within here. They either display actual names or display names. Email, if you want to include it, just for completeness so people can look up each other's details, and a comment. You've also got the option of whether documents are visible by default or whether they're only visible to particular people if they match particular properties. That's usually the one most of our customers use, although you might potentially create a specific property which allows contractors to view or not view documents that are created by your usual users. Of these 5 boxes, sorry, only the top 3 are required. You can leave the email and comment behind. New groups. Groups basically allowing you to control your users in groups, so you only have to set the permissions for projects and files once for a whole range of users. Again, it's another very simple setup. You just put a name in, and then if I just create something, and then once they're there, you then pick which users are in that group, and it's literally just a tick list of those you want to do, and then obviously you can modify and delete the groups once you've created them. If we move, save my changes. If we move on to the search, if you have Microsoft or an indexing service set up on the server machine, you can then enable indexing of the Vault. If your Vault is very large at the moment, this will take obviously a very long time to do the first time round. Once the catalogue has been built, usually it doesn't take too long to keep it up to date. The advantages are it gives you some brief status on the number of the total documents, and it does help speed up the searching within the Vault a little bit. It depends mostly on size of Vault, number of files in the Vault. and whether you've actually got the indexing available. Because I've got my Vault installed on a laptop machine rather than a server, there isn't an indexing service available for me to use anyway, but it's an option if you're finding the searching is getting very slow. So we come to revision schemes. I'm not going to go through the whole of the revision schemes. The reason I'm not is there is already a web snippet on our YouTube channel, on our website, which covers that in a lot more detail than I could fit into this seminar. So feel free to go and check that one out, and in that one I go through all of the options for primary, secondary, how we set them up in common areas, what the ranges and listings are doing, and what these two tick boxes at the bottom mean. So I'm going to skip through that today. The revision table. The revision table is basically it's an option which means you can add revision tables to your drawings, and rather than updating them manually, you can get Workgroup to update them for you. So you tick it to allow Workgroup to control any revision tables it finds. You then choose which of your revision sections you're going to have displaying in the rows of your revision tables. So if, for example, you have a primary and a secondary scheme, you can show just for primary or major revision changes to show in your revision table, and all of the minor secondary revision changes won't be shown, mainly to stop your table getting overly full. You can choose how many rows you show. Default, as we can see here, is 3. And you can also choose ascending or descending. That's basically, are you putting your revision table at the top of the screen, the bottom of the screen? Do you want it to count away or away from the title bar or not? But have a play with those to see which way works best on your particular company drawing template. We then come to the Projects tab. At the moment, you can see I just have sample project listed. Library components doesn't exist as a separate project because that's controlled automatically by Workgroup. I'll show you where that's created from in a second. A new project, quite simple. You give it a project name and a description, and then you say where it is. And as you can see, this one I'm about to create is going to be a root level project. So this project could only be created from within the Vault admin tool. If, however, I chose to put it inside sample, this project could be created inside the SolidWorks add-in if you've got the option to allow users to create sub-projects. I'll drop that into the root level. So now we have a project called new and a description called first. Descriptions are editable after you've created the project. Project names are not, so just be a little bit careful about that. Bulk check-in, we've got copy and delete project, do essentially what they say. Archive project, what happens is it takes the project, it will go through, cut out any older revisions than a particular age and compress them. It doesn't allow you to archive the project and completely remove it from visibility in the Vault, because if you delete the folder it loses some of the information it needs to recover it, which is never a good thing. So that's just a compression technique more than anything else. Bulk check-in, for those of you who've already got Vaults, it's usually not relevant, but if you're just thinking about setting up a Vault, oh, I haven't given myself permission to that Vault, that's very careless. So what this enables you to do is pick a whole series of folders or files, and what you can do is you can choose a particular folder and add all files of a particular type in for the check-in. It then allows you to set up property mappings, so if SolidWorks files have already got properties, you can map them to the properties that exist inside Workgroup, and I'll show you some property mapping a bit later. Which project do you want to check it all into? So for example, I could say I want to check it all into the sample project, and I can say create new subprojects for subfolders. So if I've already got subfolders within the folder I'm going to choose, then this enables me to bring them across. We've got revisions, so you can choose to pick the default revision, so this would be the first revision in your Vault, or you can choose to read from a particular file property called revision, obviously, or you can choose to set everything to a specific revision when it's checked in. You can also retain ownership and give it a note when it's checked in so you know why it happened. As you can see here, default is bulk check-in and then date and time. If you've got lifecycle enabled, you can then also choose to put them into a specific lifecycle state. But usually for most files you're bringing in as a mass, they're going to go into your first lifecycle state, so default's fine. And then if you want a report file, you can save it away there to a specific location so you can check on it later and see if any particular files didn't work. So that's bulk check-in. You've also got your project permissions. So as you can see here, sample has got some project permissions set up. PDMW admin is given read-write access. User read is given read-only, and user write is given read-write. The designers group doesn't have any explicit rights set. If we go to the new, you can see nobody has any rights to the new project folder. If we choose read-write for designers, that would give everybody in the designers group read-write access. And if I just flip back to there, and I'll just put those two users, in fact let's put those two users into the designers group, you can see when I give the designers group, they're showing there, the permission, you can see it also shows up as being given read-write access to the two users who are in that group. There's also an option at the top here, administrators have read-write access to all projects, so don't show them in the list. Now my PDMW admin user is an administrator, so if I tick it, disappears from the list because you've got read-write to everything. So that can be a nice, easy tool to give your administrator access to everything, so they can help all the users on a day-to-day basis. You also have a copy project permissions option. So if, for example, you've brought in a number of folders or created a number of folders and you want them all to match an existing folder, then copy project permissions to copy project A's permissions to a range of other projects. Now, lifecycle enables you to give sort of workflow states to files. You enable it, tick it on. Do you want to control document access using status? So if users don't have rights to a particular state, they can't access the document at all. So rather than moving it from a development project to a release project, you can control the lifecycle status. For example, you could create a new status called development, and you could create a new status called released, and then you can control access to files based on which one it's in. We've then got a section of options down here for what to do when you move a file from one status to the other status. So this is allow status changes on check-in and also control the revision level. So do you base it on what it was in the vault before check-in or what you've selected in the check-in dialog box? Who can change the status? So you could say a particular user group, so you could say designers are the only group who can change states. You've also got the rules for what happens in that particular lifecycle status. So you might have, for example, a checking state where a manager's got to check it before it can move on. So if you move a file from development into the checking state, then you automatically switch the owner to the quality manager or the engineering manager for them to check it before it can move on, and obviously nobody else can make changes till they have. You can also choose to change other document revisions to a selected status. So for example, when things move to released, you can move all the development revisions to obsolete if there was an obsolete status, for example. You also get to see which revision codes are available at which lifecycle statuses. So you could, for example, say released only has, let's do it that way around, secondary, and development only has primary and working copy, so that you can work and you can swap over what revisions are shown on files as you move from development to released. And then you've got that final option, do not allow a document to return. That's essentially saying that it doesn't shift backwards along your life cycle, it can only go forwards. This box down the bottom, control document access using status, this is now enabled, so you can choose which people have access to files in the development state. So you might say designers can access it read-write, and user read can't see it at all, and then in the release state you have read-only for everybody as an example. And that's just a way of controlling it. We then come to the Properties tab. Now this is essentially, don't worry too much about this side here, the property mappings bit is more important. So if you are checking in SolidWorks files, you can see here you've got a SolidWorks property called description equals the Workgroup PDM property description. Now if you wanted your SolidWorks property, actually you'd call it, for example, you create a whole load of files and they all had desk as the description property. Then if you put this mapping in here, then when they go into the vault, SolidWorks Workgroup PDM will automatically pick up
the desk property you've already created and use it as in place of description. And vice versa, you enter description in Workgroup and it will push it through to SolidWorks just as the desk. And obviously that carries through to all the others. I mean, it's quite common to see users with a revision property just called Rev, for example. And that's just to make your life a little bit easier. You can set it up so that if you've got files already, you've got a particular property scheme already, then you can continue to use that and you just line it up with the Workgroup PDM. As you can see here, we can also set particular properties for Excel, Word, to match with other things, or you can do the same with title block attributes and then how they map across into Workgroup as well. But most people find this is the one they edit most often because they've already got files with particular property structure. So that's very easy. That's really the main button you need on here. We now come to standard libraries. Now I mentioned earlier that I explained how you get this folder here. Essentially that folder there appears because of this tick box. So what happens is we have said we are not going to check in toolbox or library items because we don't want to control the revision of them. For toolbox items, for example, we don't want to control the revision of them because they live in the toolbox, so you don't ever want them to fully go into the vault. And also you don't control the revision of an ISO bolt, so we're not going to check them in. We then put the tick box display reference files in a separate project, and as soon as we do that, this library components folder will exist, and any folders within it that are listed here, which we'll come to in a second, appear as subheadings below that. If you do allow the check-in of these documents, then you can they just appear within your normal folder structure. You can't separate them out in the same way. Now, this section at the top, basically folders that are listed in toolbox parts or SolidWorks data are automatically recognized as toolbox folders, and that is then, if you choose disable check-in, those folders are automatically not checked in. Sometimes customers will have folders, for example, standard parts or purchase parts or reference parts, which is a library that you've created yourself of parts used on a regular basis and don't control the revisions of. And you don't want those to go in the vault either. You want them to live in an external location. In which case, add them as a folder. You give it a display name, and that is the name that appears in these subfolders here. So, for example, if I put purchase parts in display folder path from a server, then any folders or any parts that we try to check in that lived in that folder path would appear in a subfolder purchased items. As you can see here, we've got disable checking of documents is recommended, and it defaults to disable checking of documents as we see it on the screen at the moment. Finally, we've got the triggers page. Now, what can happen is Workgroup can send out a message to say certain actions have happened, and you can see the notifications that messages can be sent out on. Now, this takes a little bit of setting up. You need to install on the server the Microsoft Message Queuing tool, or MSMQ, and that then receives the message from Workgroup. The difficult bit, that's the easy bit. The difficult bit beyond that is this, you then need to write a piece of code which then sends the message on to something else. So although we can out of the box send the message to the server and the server records it's had a message, we can't get that message to you, the user, without you writing an additional piece of code to listen out for it. Very few of our customers use it, but it is there if you do want that automatic messaging to happen. And that really takes us through all of the options within the Vault. The major ones that you need to think about when setting up is the Vault settings page. You need to have a good thing about what you want to do and how you want to use the Vault. You need to fill in your users and groups, but that's pretty self-explanatory. Revision scheme, you must think about your revision scheme before you start the Vault. If you set up a revision scheme, use it for 6 months, and then realize that actually didn't really work and doesn't do what you want, and then change it, it becomes very difficult to make sure all of the files that already exist in the Vault are moved over. You have to check them out and check them in and reset their revisions. It just becomes a bit of a time, a time sink, really. So it's always worth having a proper think about what you want your revisions to be before you dive in. You then got your project structure. Now, depending on how your project structure works and depending whether you want lots of root folders or not, you either need to set this up before you start, or you can sort of let it grow over time. Quite a common one we see with several customers is they will create one top-level project, which, for example, is the company name, so Innova, and then they'll put their projects within that so that the users can create subfolders under the Innova top-level project. Life cycle, if you think you're going to want it, you need to have a think about how you want it to work. A lot of our customers don't use it. It does add quite a lot of additional complexity to how you're going to use the Vault, but it is available. So really, like I said, the major ones are Vault settings, making sure you filled in users or groups, setting up your revision scheme correctly, and projects. And that's really the major setup that's going on there. So thank you very much for watching. Oh, let me just get back to the PowerPoint slide. Thank you very much for watching. As you can see, there's some future webinars coming up. How to remove SolidWorks, something we recommend you do before you upgrade each year. Introduction to SolidWorks flow simulation, and some stuff on sheet metal design as well. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask, or send me an email, either support@innovasystems.co.uk, or questions specific to this webinar you can send to david@innovasystems.co.uk, and I'll be happy to answer them. One question I have had come through is, when do you get Workgroup? Workgroup is part of the professional package. So yeah, you need SolidWorks Professional in order to get the SolidWorks add-in for it. You can install it as part of the standard package, so with SolidWorks Standard as well, and get the Workgroup add-in or the Workgroup licenses separately. But then, of course, you'd miss out on all the additional benefits of SolidWorks Professional. Are there any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much for coming. Goodbye.